I heard him. I wasn't supposed to, but I did. His voice cut through the silence like a jagged knife, low and bitter, just inches from my ear. How much longer are you going to keep costing everyone, Vanessa? You should have just died. I couldn't move. I couldn't open my eyes. But in that moment, I felt everything. The venom in his words, the disgust behind each syllable, the weight of a truth I was never meant to hear. I wanted to scream, to cry, to ask him why, but my body, it refused to obey. They say when you're in a coma, your mind drifts in a dreamless sleep. That's a lie. The truth is far more cruel. You float in a limbo of shadows and echoes, stuck in your own body, with no voice, no power, only your thoughts and whatever pieces of the world manage to reach you. For me, that world came in muffled sounds, machines humming, doors opening, someone crying softly. And then came his voice. Brandon, my husband. I still don't know how I ended up here. One moment I was driving to a board meeting, late, tired, and thinking about the quarter's numbers. The next, everything went blank. The doctors told my parents it was a traumatic brain injury from a collision. A driver ran a red light. I never saw it coming. I didn't remember the impact, but I remembered waking up to darkness, to stillness, to my body no longer being mine. The first few days, I heard very little. The soft beep of machines, footsteps, then my mother's voice, trembling, layered with hope and fear. Vanessa, sweetie, if you can hear me, we're here. We love you. Please come back to us. I wanted to run to her, hold her hand, let her know I wasn't gone. But all I could do was scream inside my own mind. Then came Brandon. I knew his cologne before I heard his footsteps. The scent of power, carefully curated, like everything else about him. He greeted the nurses warmly, thanked the doctors, sat beside me and brushed my hair like he always did when people were watching. Hey, babe, he whispered once, you're strong. You'll make it. That day I cried, not because I believed him, but because for a moment I thought maybe he still cared. I was wrong. The third week I began to notice something off. His visits grew shorter, his touches colder. He started talking when he thought no one else was around, talking not to me, but at me. And what he said, it changed everything. Your company's bleeding money while you lie here. You didn't leave me passwords, Vanessa. You didn't even leave me a damn exit strategy. His voice held no love, only frustration and impatience. I had trusted Brandon, believed in him. We built everything together, or so I thought. The business, the lifestyle, the image. I brought him into my world when he had nothing but charm and ambition. And now here I was trapped while he sat there counting the days until he could collect what I built. The worst part, I couldn't warn anyone, couldn't tell my parents, couldn't even blink. Dr. Blake visited often. I remembered his voice. It was calm, steady, almost soothing. He'd speak to my parents about neuroplastic response and sensory stimulation. I heard him say once that patients like me might be able to hear, even if we couldn't respond. My mother clung to that like a lifeline. My father, more stoic, stood silent, gripping my hand. I wanted to grip his back, just one squeeze, but nothing. Brandon kept coming, kept pretending. Flowers. Forced sighs. But every time the room was empty, his mask slipped. And slowly, everything I thought I knew about him unraveled. I used to think betrayal was a sharp, sudden thing. A knife in the back. But it's not. Sometimes it's slow, quiet, and it wears your wedding ring. He thought I couldn't hear, that I'd never remember. But I did. Every word, every whisper. And someday, I'd make sure he regretted saying them. Brandon never missed a visit, not because he loved me, but because appearances mattered to him more than anything else. He brought white roses once a week. Always white, always pristine. He'd walk through the lobby with just the right balance of grief and poise, nodding politely to the nurses, cracking a faint, practiced smile when someone offered sympathy. To the world, he was the husband who hadn't given up. To me, he was a stranger I once loved. He sat by my bed and read out loud from books I never liked, his voice flat and distracted. He didn't hold my hand anymore. He touched my wrist, just enough to make sure it looked right if someone walked in. I hated that I could feel his fingers, but not move mine. I hated that I could hear his words, but not scream when he whispered, "I can't keep doing this, Vanessa. I didn't sign up to babysit a vegetable." I remember the day I understood what he really wanted. He arrived late, his shirt wrinkled, breath laced with alcohol and cheap cologne. There were no flowers this time, no greetings for the staff. He leaned over me and said, "You know how much this room costs me every day? This isn't love. This is debt." I wanted to vanish into the sheets, to become nothing, so I wouldn't have to listen, but I couldn't escape his voice. Every breath he took near me was calculated. Every word he spoke to my parents, carefully rehearsed. "She's a fighter," he'd say to my mom with that sorrowful head tilt he must have practiced in the mirror. "I believe she'll wake up." But alone with me, his tone curdled into something bitter and raw. "You should have given me access to your accounts. You thought I wouldn't know how to run things without you." I didn't know what was worse, the greed or the entitlement. Brandon had always been charming. That was his currency. That's how he got through life, convincing people he was the victim or the savior, depending on what he needed. When we met, I mistook his ambition for drive, his attention for love. He used to tell me, "You see me, Vanessa. You make me better." I didn't realize I was just the ladder he needed to climb out of mediocrity. And once he got high enough, he looked down on me like I was the one holding him back. At night, when the ward was quieter, I felt everything more intensely. The hum of the machines, the ticking of the clock, and my own breath, shallow and rhythmic, reminding me that I was still here, even when he wished I wasn't. One afternoon, I felt the warmth of my mother's hand on mine. She spoke softly, with that same hope I used to find annoying, but now clung to like air. "We're not giving up on you, sweetheart. Brandon's doing everything he can. We all are." I wanted to scream, "No, Mom. He's not. He never was." But all I could do was lie there, listening to her misplace her trust in the man who was already planning the day I wouldn't wake up. Dr. Blake continued to check on me every day. He spoke gently, respectfully, even when no one else was around. He never rushed, never looked through me like I was furniture. I knew he believed in something real, something human. When he told my parents, "Patients like Vanessa may still be aware. Talking to her matters," I felt that invisible thread of connection pull tighter. He was trying, and so was I, even if my body refused to show it. But Brandon was growing impatient. He didn't want hope. He wanted closure. And the longer I stayed alive, the more inconvenient I became. I started to fear what he might do next. Not just for me, but for my parents, for everything I'd worked for everything I was still holding on to in the dark. Then one night, everything changed. I heard someone that didn't belong. A new voice. Soft, small, and impossibly kind. "Hi, I'm Maya. I'm gonna sit here with you for a while, okay?" I didn't recognize her voice. It wasn't a nurse. It wasn't a visitor. It was a child. And for the first time in weeks, I felt something shift. Something real. Something warm. She whispered, "They say you're sleeping, but I think you're just waiting for the right person to talk to. Maybe I can be that person." I didn't know who Maya was, but somehow her voice reached places Brandon's never could. And in that moment, I didn't feel alone anymore. Maya came back the next night. I wasn't sure how I knew it was her at first. Just the way the air shifted, the sound of little feet patted softly on the vinyl floor, and then her whisper, "Hey, it's me again." Her voice was soft, uncertain, like she wasn't supposed to be there, but I held on to it like a lifeline. It wasn't a doctor's voice. It wasn't a voice pretending to care. It was small, honest, real. "I brought my bear," she said one night. "He helps me when I get scared. I think you might need him more than I do." I wanted to cry. I wanted to reach out and hug her, to tell her thank you. But all I could do was listen as she carefully placed something on the edge of my blanket. Her bear. The first gift anyone had given me in weeks. Maya started visiting every night, like it was a secret mission she'd given herself. Sometimes she crawled under my bed, hiding from the nurses. Sometimes she sat quietly on the floor, just humming. And other times, she told me everything. About the other kids in the pediatric ward. About the nurses who gave her extra pudding. About how she didn't really remember her parents. But she liked it better that way. It hurt less. Her voice had the kind of resilience that only comes from surviving too much, too young. And every night, she ended her visit the same way. "I'll come back tomorrow. I don't want you to be alone." I never was. Not after that. It's strange what the mind chooses to hold on to when your body has let go. Maya's stories stayed with me. I repeated them in my head, replaying her words, her small laughter, the sound of her hope. They filled the empty space inside me that Brandon had hollowed out. She didn't see me as broken. She didn't care about who I used to be. She just wanted me to know I mattered. One evening, she whispered something I didn't expect. "You can be my mom if you want to." I don't have one. Not really. But I think I'd be a good daughter. Her voice cracked as she said it, like even speaking the words was fragile, risky. But in my chest, beneath the stillness and the silence, something stirred. A heartbeat. A possibility. Maya believed I could come back. And because she believed it, so did I. She kept bringing that bear with her. Even after the nurses started asking questions about where she disappeared to at night. I don't know how she kept sneaking in. Maybe someone knew and let her. Maybe fate just cleared the way. Maybe one of the night nurses knew. Maybe Dr. Blake turned a blind eye. Or maybe the universe just opened a quiet door for her to slip through. Whatever the reason, no one ever truly stopped her, and I was grateful for that. Either way, she was there. Every single night. Talking. Singing. Telling me about a world I could barely remember. One night I heard her say, "You moved your finger yesterday. Just a little. When I told you about the nurse dropping the pudding tray. I saw it. I hadn't even realized. But somewhere in my unconscious my hand had twitched. A reflex, maybe. Or maybe it was me trying to reach back. Dr. Blake noticed something too. I remembered his voice changing. Less clinical, more hopeful. She's responding. Not much, but enough. That's something." My mother cried again. But this time the tears sounded different. Brighter. Lighter. By the 7th week, something changed. I could feel it. Not in my body yet, but in the rhythm of the room, in the way the nurses spoke to me. Dr. Blake's tone was lighter. Maya's stories became more animated. And deep down, I started to believe I wasn't lost forever. And then Brandon started coming less. Maybe he felt it. The change. Maybe he realized the coma wasn't permanent after all. And that scared him more than death. He came in one day without the flowers, without the practiced face. He didn't talk to the nurses. Didn't greet my parents. He waited until the room was empty and said something I'll never forget. "You think you're winning, Vanessa? You're not. I know you can't hear me. You're just lying here like a useless burden." His voice was sharp, venomous. "I'm done pretending. I'm not spending the rest of my life in this hospital prison while you rot." That was the first time I wished I could scream. Not because I was afraid, but because Maya was there. She had snuck in again, hiding like she always did, and I could feel her body tighten beneath the bed. Her fear, her silence, her bear clutched close. She heard everything, and so did I. That moment wasn't just another secret. It was a shift, a crack in the wall Brandon built. Because this time he wasn't alone with his cruelty. Someone saw him, someone innocent, someone brave, and that changed everything. I didn't sleep that night, not that I really could, but even in the fog of my coma, something had shifted. My body was still heavy, silent, but my mind, it was screaming. screaming for someone to hear me, to stop him, to protect Maya. She had witnessed something that no child should ever see. And yet, she had been braver than anyone. She didn't cry. She didn't run. Not until he left. I don't know how long it took her to crawl out from under the bed. But when she did, I could feel her trembling hands brush against mine. "I'm sorry," she whispered, so quietly I almost missed it. "I didn't mean to hide, but he was so angry. I thought he might hurt you. Or me." She paused, sniffling. "I don't think he loves you." It wasn't just the words that broke me. It was the way she said them, like she was ashamed for having to say the truth out loud. The next thing I remember is the sound of her footsteps, fast and frantic, echoing down the hallway. And then voices, raised, urgent. Dr. Blake's voice, low and concerned. The soft gasp of my mother. And then the silence that follows when the air in the room changes. I heard her tell them everything. "He said she should have died," Maya said, her voice shaking. "He was going to turn something off. He was really mad. I think he wanted her gone." They asked her again and again, gently, carefully, like they weren't sure they wanted to believe it. But Maya didn't back down. She repeated his words, described his face, the anger, the way he stood over me like a man ready to pull a plug and walk away. Then, as she pulled out the bear, I hadn't realized it until that moment, but the little stuffed bear, her companion, her comfort, was more than a toy. It was a voice recorder. Dr. Blake had given it to her weeks earlier to help her process her emotions. He never expected it to capture a confession. They played the recording, and there it was, Brandon's voice, as cold and sharp as I remembered. "You think I want to live like this? Chained to a hospital bed, wasting money on someone who's already gone? If she would just die, this would all be easier." My mother gasped. My father swore under his breath. Dr. Blake didn't say a word, but I could feel the shift in him, like something settled deep in his spine. A line had been crossed, and now it was time to act. They called the police. I didn't see what happened next, but I heard about it. Dr. Blake asked Brandon to come in, said it was urgent, that there were changes in my condition and he needed to speak privately. Brandon showed up the next day, annoyed but curious. He didn't expect to walk into an ambush. The officers were already waiting. So was Dr. Blake. And Maya, brave little Maya, standing in the corner, clutching her bear like a sword. Brandon laughed at first. "What, you think I was serious? She's in a coma, for God's sake. You can't arrest me for venting." But Dr. Blake didn't flinch. He looked Brandon in the eye and said, "You weren't venting. You were planning. And the only reason she's still here is because someone heard you." Brandon froze. Then, like a child caught in a lie, he snapped. "So what if I wanted her gone? You expect me to waste the rest of my life on a woman who can't speak, can't move." That was when the officers stepped forward. They didn't need more. The recording, the statements, his own admission, it was enough. Brandon was taken away in handcuffs. And for the first time since I fell into that awful darkness, I felt safe. When I finally opened my eyes days later, the room was quiet. The air was warm. And beside me, sitting cross-legged on the chair, was Maya. She looked up, eyes wide, tears brimming, and whispered, "You came back." I couldn't speak yet. My throat was dry. My lips cracked. But I smiled. And when she reached for my hand, I squeezed back. It wasn't much, but it was real. The first movement came like a whisper, a flicker in my pinky finger that set off a chain reaction of cautious hope. The next day, I managed to blink on command. Then came a nod, a breath, a word. That tiny movement, so small, so simple, was everything. Maya gasped, then laughed, then cried. She laid her head on the side of my bed and whispered, "I knew you were still in there." I told everyone. I closed my eyes again, but this time not out of fear or helplessness. This time I let go because I wasn't alone anymore. I was home. The days that followed were a blur of pain and softness, of sounds returning in layers, and light that hurt my eyes more than it should. My body felt foreign, like it belonged to someone else, and I had been dropped inside of it without instructions. But through it all, Maya was there. She never left my side. She told me stories I'd already heard, some of them twice, maybe 3 times, but I never stopped her. Her voice was like sunlight warming cold skin. Every time I drifted off into exhaustion, I knew she was still there, humming or talking to her bear. That silly little toy had become a symbol of everything that saved me and of the girl who refused to let me disappear. The doctors were shocked by my progress. Dr. Blake especially. He stood by my bed one morning, checking the monitors with a look that was half science, half something deeper. "You're stubborn," he said, smiling for the first time in a way that wasn't just professional. But I think we both knew that. I blinked slowly in reply. I couldn't speak yet, but I didn't need to. He understood. Maya clung to my hand like she owned it, and in some ways maybe she did. I owed her everything, not just for telling the truth or for hiding under my bed when no one else was watching. I owed her for her hope, for her love, for seeing me when even I forgot who I was. "You remember me, right?" she asked one afternoon, her voice suddenly timid. "I mean, I know you couldn't talk before, but you heard me, didn't you?" I tried to nod, my neck muscles still weak. I managed just the faintest tilt, but it was enough. She lit up. "I knew it. I knew you weren't gone." And then she said it again, that fragile hope wrapped in a child's voice. "Do you still want to be my mom?" My heart clenched in the best possible way. I didn't cry much anymore, I was too exhausted. But in that moment, I felt the burn behind my eyes. I tightened my grip on her hand, held it just long enough to say yes without speaking. Maya didn't ask again. She just smiled, like something inside her had been waiting to exhale for weeks. Later that night, when the room was quiet and the hallway lights dimmed, I whispered my first full sentence in weeks. "You saved me." It came out raw, barely audible, but she heard it. Her little face froze, then burst into a grin. "I told them," she said. "I told everyone you were still in there." Dr. Blake came in shortly after to check on me. He saw the way Maya clung to my side, the way I responded to her more than anyone, and he didn't question it. He just nodded, gently touched my shoulder, and said, "Looks like you two found each other." And we had. But it wasn't until a week later, when I was strong enough to sit up for more than 5 minutes, that the weight of everything truly hit me. Brandon was gone, arrested. The business would go through litigation. The press would swarm once word leaked. Most of my business accounts had been frozen during the investigation. The board had appointed a legal trustee to oversee operations. Brandon's name had never been on any official paperwork. He thought marrying me made him a partner. The courts disagreed, and I would have to rebuild from the ground up. My name, my reputation, my future. But none of that scared me. What scared me was the thought that if Maya hadn't been there, if her small hands hadn't held mine night after night, I might not have had the strength to come back at all. She didn't save my life with a medical miracle. She saved it with presence, with faith, with love that asked for nothing. A child, a stranger, now my daughter. When the paperwork was finalized, when the court approved the guardianship, and I walked through the hospital doors with Maya's hand in mine, I felt whole in a way I hadn't in years. She looked up at me and whispered, "I don't have to go back to the children's wing anymore?" I shook my head, smiling through tears. "No, baby, you're coming home." We didn't have much, just an apartment waiting for us, a bed we'd share for a while, a toy bear that still had Brandon's recording saved deep inside it, a reminder of how far we'd come. But for the first time in a long, long time, I wasn't scared of starting over. I had Maya, and she had me. Starting over was harder than I expected, but it was also simpler in a way I'd forgotten life could be. No more meetings, no more boardroom battles, no more carefully curated image of the woman who could do it all. I didn't need to do it all anymore. I just needed to make breakfast for Maya, walk her to her new school, remember to take deep breaths when the nightmares came, and let the mornings come anyway. Maya adjusted faster than I did. That's the thing about children, they don't wait for perfect conditions to grow. She made our little apartment feel like home with nothing more than drawings taped to the fridge and her bear sitting on the couch like a house guest. She asked questions sometimes, but never too many. She didn't want to know what Brandon had done, just whether he'd ever come back. "No," I said once, with more steel in my voice than I intended. "He won't." And she never asked again. Dr. Blake, Jeremy, checked in often. At first, it was just medical, routine follow-ups, healing benchmarks. But soon it was more. Coffee on the porch while Maya napped. Long conversations about trauma, about guilt, about what it meant to come back when so much of yourself had stayed behind. He never pushed, never pried. He sat with silence as comfortably as he did with words. I remember the first time he brought dinner. Maya was drawing on the floor, her tongue sticking out slightly in concentration, and I was struggling to fold laundry one-handed. He walked in holding takeout from a little Thai place near the hospital and said, "I figured you've had enough cafeteria food to last a lifetime." I laughed. It hurt, but it felt good. Real. I didn't have to pretend around him. Not anymore. And over time, what began as gratitude turned into something else. Something slower, steadier. Something that made me look forward to the quiet moments when Maya was asleep and we could talk like people who had both seen too much, but weren't afraid to begin again. It wasn't romantic right away. It wasn't supposed to be, but it was honest. And honesty was the rarest thing I had left. He was there when I went to court for guardianship. He held Maya's hand while I signed the papers. He hugged us both when the judge said the words I'd been dreaming about for weeks. Legal custody granted. He came with us to Maya's first dance recital, where she tripped over her shoelaces halfway through but got up laughing. He helped me learn how to navigate panic attacks when a sudden beeping sound triggered memories of hospital machines. He never made me feel like I was broken. And one evening, after Maya had fallen asleep, curled up between us on the couch, he looked at me, really looked at me, and said, "You saved her life, but she saved yours too." I nodded, tears prickling the edges of my eyes. She reminded me how to live again. Jeremy reached over, took my hand, and said, "You don't have to do it alone anymore." It wasn't a proposal. It wasn't a promise. It was an invitation. And I said yes without saying a word. That night, I realized something no trauma could take from me. Love doesn't always arrive the way you expect it to. Sometimes it shows up in a hospital hallway, holding a chart and asking gentle questions. Sometimes it hides under a hospital bed with a stuffed bear and a heart full of hope. And sometimes it waits for you to come back to yourself, patiently, quietly, until you're ready to feel it again. I was ready. 2 years later, our house was filled with noise. Not chaos, just life. Laughter. Piano keys that Maya was still learning to master. A baby crying from the nursery. The sizzle of dinner on the stove, and Jeremy humming a melody I didn't recognize but liked anyway. It was the kind of noise that filled up the corners of silence I'd once been trapped in. I never thought I'd feel this kind of peace again. Never thought it was possible to go from being half alive in a hospital bed to standing barefoot in my own kitchen, with a toddler on my hip and a girl at the table drawing stars with glitter pens. Maya had become a sister, a helper, a fierce protector. She loved her little brother like he'd always been there. She read him stories, sang him lullabies she made up on the spot. And sometimes, when she thought no one was listening, she'd whisper to him, "You're lucky, you know. We got a second chance." And she was right. We did. There were still hard days. I'd be lying if I said the past didn't follow me sometimes, creeping in through a scent, a sound, a memory I hadn't invited. But the difference was I no longer faced them alone. Jeremy was more than just the man who stood by me in a sterile hospital room. He was the partner who stayed when the cameras disappeared. Who changed diapers at 3 a.m. and learned how to braid Maya's hair without ever complaining. He didn't fill the space Brandon left. He never tried to. He helped me build something entirely new. One afternoon, Maya came into the kitchen holding the bear. The same one she used to sneak under my hospital bed. Its fur was a little more worn, one ear slightly bent, but the recorder inside still worked. She climbed onto a stool, placed the bear gently on the counter, and looked up at me. Do you remember what he said? I knew what she meant. I hadn't listened to that recording since the trial. It had been used as evidence, sealed in court documents, locked away. But Maya still kept it, not because she needed to remember the pain, but because it reminded her how far we'd come. I remember, I said softly. She nodded. I don't want to forget, because it means we made it. Right. I leaned down, kissed her forehead, and whispered, right. We never played the recording again, but we never threw the bear away either. It sat on a shelf in Maya's room, beside picture frames and paper flowers, and a drawing she made of the three of us on a hill under a sky full of stars. Sometimes I caught her looking at it, not with sadness, but with strength. That bear had witnessed both the darkest and brightest moments of her young life. And now it was just part of her story, part of mine too. People sometimes ask how I survived, how I came back after everything. And the answer is always the same. Someone stayed, not someone strong, not someone rich, not someone with power. A little girl, a bear, a doctor who didn't give up, and a love that found me when I thought I was lost forever. I'm not the same woman I was before the accident. I don't run companies anymore. I don't stand at podiums or fly first class to pitch meetings in glass towers. But I wake up every day to the sound of my daughter giggling, to the feel of Jeremy's hand brushing mine while he pours coffee, to the warmth of a baby curled against my chest. And I wouldn't trade this life for anything. Maya said once, families aren't always born. Sometimes they're built. She was right. Ours was built from truth, from pain, from healing, from love. And in the end, it was the life I never saw coming. The life I never knew I needed, but the one I'll spend the rest of my days grateful for. Sometimes the people who save us aren't the strongest, the loudest, or the ones we expect. Sometimes they come in small, quiet forms, a child's voice in the dark, a hand that doesn't let go, a love that asks for nothing in return. Vanessa lost everything the moment her world went silent. Her body betrayed her. Her husband abandoned her. But one voice, tiny, unwavering, cut through the darkness and reminded her that she was still here, still worth fighting for. This isn't just a story about betrayal or revenge. It's about how healing begins when someone sees us at our weakest and stays anyway. It's about second chances, chosen family, and the quiet power of kindness that asks for nothing but gives everything. Because sometimes we don't need the world to believe in us. We just need one person to whisper, I know you're still in there. And that can change everything.